What's up, guys? In this video we're going to set up my tracking system and get started with tracking. And the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to list out some requirements that I want my tracking system to have and also what I want to have output from it. So we're going to list that out to begin with, and then we're going to go and set the thing up. So of course, the reason that we're making this is to use it as a tool. It is not the end-all be-all, but rather it is a step in the way of getting what we want. So the outputs that I want my spending plan to have, my budget, my tracking system, I'm going to call it my tracking system slash budget, because I think I'm mainly going to be using it as a tracking system, not really much as a budget, but we'll see what happens. I do have the option to turn it into a budget if I do want to, I guess, but I'm going to put that in my requirements anyway. One of the outputs I want is, of course, total monthly expenses / outflows. So at the end of the month, I want to be able to know exactly how much I spent that month. Second thing I wanted to output for me is total inflows. So that's income and other things. And what else do I want from it? I want to know things like be able to figure out cash flow from it, because total expenses, incurring an expense doesn't mean that the cash has actually left my accounts, because I can buy something using credit and that money has been spent to buy the item, but all the money hasn't left my account. I can buy something for $100, that's an expense, but the only money that left my checking account is $25 because I paid the minimum payment for it or something. So it needs to be able to differentiate between cash flow. So I want to know, a user question would be, how much new debt did I incur this month, for example? And then I have some requirements for this thing. So here are the requirements. If you watched the last video, so the first requirement is I want it to auto import from my accounts, all my accounts that I have. I want it to auto import there. If you watched my last video, the optional one where I'm doing some organization, you see that it's pretty crazy. I got a lot of credit cards and then a lot of other flows that happen. So I'm not keeping track of that manually. I want something that can import transactions from all my accounts. Next, I need it to, this is obvious, but differentiate between expenses and transfers. Next, I want it to differentiate between expenses and transfers. There are sometimes I'm going to have transfers to other accounts. Let's say I'm just moving money from staging to Venmo. That's a transfer. That's not an expense. So it's got to be able to differentiate between that. The auto import is going to say, oh, money has left the staging. And then the auto import for Venmo should say, oh, money has come into Venmo. So that software that I'm using has to know that I have to be able to call that a transfer, and it's not going to be calling it an expense. It has to be able to handle reimbursable expenses. I don't have a work credit card or spending account, but I do incur expenses for work on my personal accounts, and I create an expense report every month and get reimbursed for it. So that's this workflow here. I spend work expenses. The work expenses get reimbursed to me, and that goes into my staging account. These are not personal expenses, so I don't want to include that in my personal reports. So the thing has to be able to handle that in such a way that that can show that that's a reimbursable expense. It's not mine. Like a tracking account or something like that. Has to be able to handle bill payments, like credit cards, right? When money goes from my checking account to a credit card, that's not an expense, that's another type of transfer, and that has to be able to handle that. Okay, has to be able to differentiate between cash flow and net income. Like we said up here, right? The cash flow, the net income is not always going to equal the cash flow. Could be different. Track increases and decreases. Debt. I could have a negative net income for the month, but I could have a positive cash flow. It's possible. Okay, what else? I wanted to support all the accounts that I have. So basically all these. Most tracking softwares that you're going to find out there will be able to get all the major banks. Okay. Easy to enter manual transactions. When I spend cash, I'm going to be using cash a bit more as I stop using credit cards as much. And cash, there's no paper trail for cash. Auto import is not going to work. So when I'm out buying stuff with cash, I want to be able to pull out my phone real quick, enter the transaction, and record it and forget about it. So it has to be pretty easy to enter manual transactions on the go. I want total customization of my categories. That I know just from experience that this requirement eliminates Mint, because Mint does not let you customize your categories to your heart's desire. So that's out the window there. All right. And cost. This is not really a requirement for me, but this is something that I do want to mention. A lot of these softwares that track your expenses and do budgets for you are going to cost money. Unless you're going to do it on your own, you're going to build your own software in Excel, or you're going to use like a piece of paper or envelopes, like physical envelopes, and put the cash in there. Most of these things that are any good are going to cost money. Now you might be thinking it's counterintuitive to buy something that's going to be a monthly fee for when you're trying to cut down your expenses. If you're thinking, well, yeah, I want to do it all on my own and I don't want to pay anything for it, I'm going to tell you right now, you got to kind of change that mindset a little bit. Because one thing that you're doing, you're not trying to cut your expenses. You're trying to understand your expenses. And if you got to pay a little bit for a software that's going to do that for you instead of reinventing the wheel, then it's very much worth it. So if cost is bothering you at this point, you might want to ask yourself how much you actually do want to do this and why you're doing this. Go back to why, perhaps, because if you don't want to pay for something at this point that's going to provide you a lot of value, then you're probably not ready to move forward. So this is a point where you actually go out and find the thing. Oh, one more thing real quick before we do that. So I'm going to go back to this, and if you watched the last video, you'll know where this came from. But if you didn't, this is basically a more detailed picture of my cash flow diagram. It's what we did in the very beginning, this, only that I made it a lot more detailed and actually listed out all my accounts there. And I got help from the balance sheet in order to make this. Okay. The accounts that I want to track, I'm going to draw a line around them. These are the accounts that I want to track. If I track all these accounts, it's going to give me all my expenses, because all my expenses, all these accounts right here from which expenses are paid, money crosses this boundary. It's also going to give me all of my income, because everything that comes into my system crosses this boundary as well. From selling stuff, I'm going to add another thing, because there are others that are linked to my staging account, but I can't remember exactly what they are right now. But any money that comes into my account will cross this boundary. Now, the brokerage, why isn't it here? Why am I putting it up here? We're going to go over this later on. Why it's important that the brokerage account is going to be outside of the day-to-day tracking realm. Okay. you could add it. I could add it to the tracking realm, but I'm going to leave it out of there. And I'm going to explain why later on. It's not important for right now. And technically, we're not at that point where we're opening brokerage accounts yet and starting to invest. So I'm going to talk about that later on, but I'm not going to include that in my tracking realm. Let's actually call this the tracking realm. Sounds kind of cool. All right. So go ahead and pause. Go find what you're going to do. Spend a day. Read what the top 10 budgeting apps are, tracking softwares. Go to NerdWallet. Go to all these places. Go to some millennials' financial independence blog. And then choose your poison. I'll be waiting right here for you. Come on, go ahead. Pause the video already. You find what you're looking for yet? Did you find it? Did you find it yet? Did you find it? All right. All right, welcome back. I'm glad that you found your tracking method. You came up with a tracking method and chose what software you're going to use. I'm going to cheat a little bit because, I already know what I'm going to use. Ta-da! And there's two reasons for this. One is that I know that it covers all these things and it gives me all this information. And secondly, I've been using it for 4 years and I know that it works really well. There are a bunch of other softwares out there that are going to work just as well. I can't really speak to them. The only ones that I've used, like really used, are YNAB, Excel, and Mint. I didn't like Mint, so I bought YNAB and never looked back. So I know how it works already, and I don't really want to spend time learning a new software because if I do that, the learning curve is really going to be in figuring out how to use the software. It's not going to be in getting the results that I want. And it works for what I want to do, so I'm not gonna go there right now. I'm not gonna learn any new thing. Like I was recently thinking I was gonna check out Tiller HQ because it imports into Google Sheets all your transactions automatically. It looks pretty cool, but I was playing around with it yesterday and I decided I can learn that thing and figure it all out and do all these add-ons and stuff. And at the end of the day, I'm just gonna get exactly what YNAB gives me. And then I spent a whole bunch of time troubleshooting, learning it, and figuring it out. These things are tools, guys. It's a hammer. If you have a hammer that works perfectly fine, and it's a 50-year-old hammer, you don't need to go buy a new hammer. You can if you want, but if the new hammer requires like 50 hours of learning and it's really just a hammer, it's the same old damn thing, it's not really worth it. So I'm going to be using YNAB. And I do want to say, one thing. If you're on the camp and you're thinking like that I'm going to just do it myself, build my own budgeting software, something that I wish I had told myself in the very beginning was don't reinvent the wheel, guys. Don't be these two people who are like, no, we're too busy. We got a bunch of stuff to do. And I'm this person right here now. I used to be these people saying I'm going to do it all on my own. Now I'm this person telling you, don't do it all on your own. Don't reinvent the wheel. Just buy a wheel. This was my very first budget that I made. All right, look how great it looks. It has entry tab where I put in the expense category and some notes. It has a button that I click this button and it automatically puts it in the transaction into the database. I didn't take pictures of everything else. So you're just going to have to imagine what the database looks like. It's like, a table. And then I had reports. I could do end of day reports, end of month reports, date range reports. I had buttons that I would click, put in the report parameters, and it would spit out data for me. It was pretty cool. It was a VBA scripted application, and I spent more time making this than I did using it. I used it for 2 weeks. And the reason for that is because I felt like this guy. I had to carry around the receipt. Every time that I spent something, I had to take it with me. I had to put it in my receipt, and at the end of the day, I had to go in here and record it, and I felt like it wasn't worth it, and I felt like George, and I didn't want to feel like George. So, guys, buy something, or get something that does it for you. If you really don't want to spend the money, first I'd ask yourself why. What's your problem with that? And secondly, I'd say rethink why you're doing this then, if you're not willing to give up a little bit of time every month to get some value from, software that gives you a lot of value. So, all right, man, that's it. We're going to go into YNAB. I think I'll break it off into the next video and set up the tracking there. So I'll see you guys next time.